you've heard about half of the show that has gone on. So if I get too far into it, obviously I realize we're here to talk about development. So just stop me. There's a lot more to unpack. I was in the Marine Corps for 4 years, and I lost my sight about 9 months after I got out to a suicide attempt. And after I got back into college,
Hello there.
hey dude, sorry about
It
that.
happens. Technology these days.
Dis on Discord's accessibility is shit. So I tried from my phone
Ah,
and two different
jeez.
computers and
I didn't
decided
realize it
neither
was going to give
worked.
you such a hard time. I've never used Google Meet before. I didn't even realize that it threw that on the calendar. I was just trying to make it an appointment.
Oh yeah, it sent me the link because I was sitting there.
Is
So
that an
whatever, we got to figure it
easier?
out.
Do they have better accessibility options?
Yeah, that works fine, and so does Zoom. This is my first time trying to do it over Discord.
Okay. Do you do a lot of
Yeah.
Discord?
No, because the accessibility is shit. I have an account from when I could see, but I don't know when the last time I used it was.
Oh yeah, I
So
gotcha. Well, hey, I appreciate you joining me today.
yeah, I'm really excited. So this will be interesting.
And so your name is Zach Tidwell. Is that right?
Correct.
I butcher names sometimes, and I want to make sure that it's all good
No, you're
there.
good. We got that generic white
Oh
guy
yeah,
name, so
it's
it's kind of
we all have the
but
same accent.
yeah, yeah.
Now, Zach, you've been how long have you been in video game development? Did you start in non-video game development, or tell me some of the background there?
Yeah, so Zanagrams is actually it's a word puzzle game, and I'm trying to grow to the point where I can do more kind of more standard games, but the big thing that I'm trying to do is build my company to the point where I can hire a sighted developer. So this all actually came about. I was in the Marine Corps for 4 years, and I lost my sight about 9 months after I got out to a suicide attempt. And after I got back into college, after I'd learned how to be a blind guy and use screen reading software and other access technologies and stuff like that, a lot of my college classes weren't accessible. And in particular, I got into a statistics class, and nothing about the class was accessible. So the school assigned someone to be my
Hmm.
eyeballs, and so she would read everything off of the software that they used, read the problems and the data sets to me. I would have her organize the data sets on a sheet of paper so she could have them in front of her, and I'd have her read different things to me while I did all the calculations on a talking scientific calculator. As I did incremental calculations, I'd record those answers in a Word document, and then at the end for like my final calculation, I'd use all those values and do what I needed to do. Give her the final answer. She'd enter it in the computer for me, and that's how. I mean, it got to the point she literally like she had to read the textbook to me and stuff. It was gross. So I ended up dropping out of college and researched why some things were accessible with my screen reading software and why others weren't. And when I found out it came down to code, I decided I was going to teach myself how to code and be part of the solution. And so I started teaching myself how to code in October of 21, and my first app came out on the 4th of July last
Wow.
year. Yeah.
And this was Xanagrams that came out, or did you have a different app that came out before that?
Xanagrams was the first one. So another it's currently just on the Apple App Store. It works on iOS and iPad OS right now. And again, if I can build my team over time, then I would love to port it over to Android as well. But it's hard. So there no game engines are accessible for developers, and no cross-platform tools are both accessible for developers and support accessible
Hmm.
interfaces. So I have to develop natively. Um, so I'm not going to put out something that's inaccessible. That's the whole reason that I started teaching myself how to code.
Well,
So
sure.
yeah, so the things that I create are they're graphical, and they would look like a normal app to you. They function normally, but they're also accessible for any sort of visual impairment on the spectrum of, I have crappy vision to I'm totally blind like me. They are accessible to people with auditory impairments and even people with upper limb amputations and motor impairments. They can use them with their voice. So it's been this whole new thing that it's kind of become a passion for me, which has been really cool.
That's very interesting. All the questions I ask moving forward and talking about your physical situation is just ahead. It in no way is meant to be offensive. I'm purely ignorant and very
Dude,
curious.
you couldn't hurt my feelings if you tried.
I know you are, but what am I?
Yeah, you.
So
Yeah, I know. I'm serious. You couldn't hurt my feelings if you tried. So you're good.
so you were in the Marines. You said 4 years. Did I hear that right?
Yeah, I was a machine gunner with 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines for 4 years.
Did you get stationed anywhere?
I was stationed on Camp Pendleton in Southern California, and I deployed twice, but I didn't see any combat.
Okay.
Yeah, so between my first and second deployments, I married my high school sweetheart and found out while I was on my second deployment she was sleeping with a married dude, and I actually found out from his wife. She tracked me down.
Oh, I bet she was
let
pissed.
me know what was going on. Yeah, so that was interesting, and it was kind of weird. We kind of became each other's therapists for like the first year of that. It was interesting, but
You and
obviously
his wife?
yeah, because we were both just kind of blindsided, which I guess he had cheated on her before, so I'm not sure she was that blindsided, but I was completely blindsided because I was gone and everything seemed fine when
Yeah.
I left. And then almost 6 months later, I've got a message from some lady I'd never heard of before. But um, long story short, I tried making it work and it didn't. That was after I came back from that
Yeah.
deployment. And shortly after I filed for divorce, I was in a really bad motorcycle accident and had
Oh
a
God.
traumatic brain injury from it. I still, so I was out at a motocross racetrack. That's really like early on when I was not doing hot, but making it work. I was just keeping myself really busy. And so pretty much every weekend, if we weren't in the field, I was going to the racetrack to ride my dirt bike.
Sure.
And I still, I have a vague memory of picking up my dirt bike on the backside of a jump, and then everything else has been filled in from everyone else until we went to dinner that night. So I made it back to my truck, and I'd played sports year round growing up, so I'd had concussions, and I knew the difference of like having my bell rung and something
Yeah.
being wrong. And I'm in Southern California at this point. My parents lived 17 hours away in Colorado, so I don't know why I called them, but I did and was like, "Hey, I think I have a concussion. I was in a motorcycle accident." And they were like, "Where
That's
are
one way
you?"
to worry your
And I
parents.
didn't know. Yeah, and so I didn't know, and they were like, "Is anyone else there?" And I was like, "Well, I'm here alone, but there are other people there." And so I talked to some other guy. They told me or told him where I was at, and they were like, "Hey, we're gonna try and get a hold of your buddies. Like, just give us a few minutes and we'll call you back." And I guess right after they hung up, I called and said the same thing. I was just like, "Hey,
Yeah.
I was in a motorcycle accident and I think I have a concussion."
Wow. Yeah.
So, uh, yeah, my buddies ended up coming and getting me, taking me to the hospital. They said I had a TBI, and the first thing I really remember is going to dinner that night. That's like the whole rest of
Yeah.
that day is just gone, which is wild. So I really started to struggle after that, though. And so that was March of 2018. I was honorably discharged in August of 2018. And then in March of 2019, I shot myself in the head. I was struggling, man. Not after that head injury, the depression just got overwhelming. It went from just not doing hot to miserable all the time and apathetic about everything. I was very agitative
Yeah.
and almost combative when you would talk to me about stuff with my ex-wife, and very impulsive. And it just, a year later, I ended up shooting myself. And so March 31st will actually be 5 years since then. And that left me totally blind, deaf in one ear, and with some other small stuff going on.
Wow. I'm trying to process all that information. Like on one hand, it's really simple what you explained, but on the other hand, it's a lot to take in, and I'm sure whatever I'm taking in is a fraction of what you've had to go through. So I'm not trying to absorb any empathy for you for what's going on. I can relate to depression. I may not be able to relate to it to that level, I haven't ever taken action on my depression like that, but I feel like I've been pretty deep in it. You know, where you contemplate the action of suicide, and it's. I think ultimately I came to a conclusion as I grew up through my 20s. I started relating life like a video game, and I'm playing it. I'm here. There's rules, so let me try to plug in and see how far I can accomplish things. That was ultimately what I ended up telling myself that separated me from attempting suicide. It was this ultimatum of productivity. Well, I mean, there are XYZ shitty things, and I realize the reality I'm in. So how do I try and make what I can of it if I'm not going to go down that route? I suppose what I'm getting at there is some kind of connection, minimal connection with maybe what you experienced. I don't know for sure, but it sounds really rough. Like I said, I have so many thoughts about this, and I'm not trying to. I don't want to say the wrong thing. It doesn't sound like you're a sensitive person, which is great. But so you said you shot yourself. I can understand getting to that point.
Yeah, but you said you can understand.
Yeah, I mean, I understand as a human why people make those decisions.
I wasn't sure if I heard you right.
Yeah, and
yeah.
I'm while I'm interviewing you, I'm trying to come up with a way to understand you more through what you've been through. I mean, you created an experience just by sheer survival, and your whole life has changed because of that. Going blind, there's blind, there's being deaf, I don't think people go mute, so to speak, but it's a type of disability or accessibility issue. Go as far as you want, but tell me what it was like in the recovery phase. We don't have to talk about the action itself, but you've clearly have turned around your mental state. You have decided to keep going and to try new things. What was it like going from, I'd imagine you were in the hospital for a while, and then you go home, you're learning. I mean, were you blind right away?
Yeah, and I was, do you swear on here?
Yeah, swear words
or no?
You can throw it on there. It's fine. I think YouTube just punishes people who cuss in the first 2 minutes, so we're good.
Okay, dude, so if you've heard about half of the shit show that has gone on. So if I get too far into it, obviously I realize we're here to talk about development. So just stop me. There's a lot more to unpack. So yeah, I'm not sure how much you
just go for it.
But basically, okay, yeah. So I also don't remember this, but after I shot myself, when my roommate found me, I was awake and talking all the way into the hospital, and they put me on life support after I got there. So whenever they brought me back, I was so messed up from the head injury and the medications I was on, and I think probably just the fact that my body was trying to acclimate to the fact that I no longer had any visual input, because I'm completely no light perception, lights out blind. And I have been since right after I shot myself, but I didn't realize it. It was weird. I could have a conversation like I am right now, but I was seeing places, and it looked like I was in real places. And so they tried explaining to me that I was blind, but I didn't comprehend it because I was so messed up. And so whenever they finally did get it across, I mean, I had to learn how to do everything again. So when I was on life support, they didn't have me on a feeding tube because my sinuses in my right orbital area were blown out. So they do a feeding tube up your nose and down the back of your throat, and they were worried they were going to do more damage. So one of their first concerns when I came back to was to get me eating, because I wasted away from, I'm 5'7". I was like 163 pounds when I went into the hospital. I was squatting 315 pounds and deadlifting 415 pounds. And by the time I got out of the hospital, I was 138 pounds. So I'm not a big dude, but I was, the meat that I did have, I didn't have a lot to lose, but I did. So after they did the feeding tube and stuff, I mean, I had to learn how to do everything. I had to learn how to brush my teeth. I had to learn how to pee. Like I literally like physically could not make the cognitive connection to pee. I had to learn how to walk, and actually, as I was learning, like the first step was, okay, hey, can you sit up without your body going into
Hmm.
shock? And then, okay, can you stand next to the bed without your body going into shock? And that took, a couple of days of trying before my body would actually tolerate it. And then slowly walking, where they would have basically this belt. It's called a gait belt, like around my waist, so someone could just hang on to me and keep me from falling. And they gave me a Swiffer mop handle with a tennis ball on the end of it as like my
Wow.
blind guy cane. And they didn't know it was a private facility, and they obviously didn't know how to deal with a blind guy. But at some point, once I was stable and everything, I got transferred to the VA hospital, and everything kind of flipped into a new gear there. They were familiar with dealing with blind vets, and so the Denver VA where I live actually has a dedicated visual impairment services team, and so there's a team of professionals that have master's degrees in blind rehab specifically in different areas, whether
Oh,
it's
wow.
cane training or access technology stuff or cooking and all that. So when they transferred me to the VA hospital, one like the head of their team sat down with me and was basically like, "Hey, what do you like to do?" And meanwhile, I didn't know how to do anything for myself, and I wasn't even wiping my ass yet at this point. Like it was very early on. I still had a bullet hole in my forehead. They just knew that they could transfer me without anything seriously going wrong because I was awaiting facial reconstruction surgery. So they were stuffing the bullet hole with this antibacterial gauze twice a day. And other than that, like I was doing rehab stuff. I just had a big wad of gauze in my head and covering it. And so she was like, "What do you like to do?" And I was like, "Well, when I could see, I liked to ski and snowboard and rock climb and ride motocross and downhill mountain bike." And she basically told me I'd be able to do all of that if I wanted to, except for the motorcycles. And so that immediately became, okay, I'm going to get back to that. And so we got to work. I started learning Braille, started learning how to use a real cane and do basic stuff. Eventually, I had my facial reconstruction surgery. They sent me after I got out of the hospital, which was 51 days later. I was at home with my parents for a month where I didn't really have any real blind guy skills. And so then they sent me to blind rehab, and I basically went to school to be a blind guy for 2.5 months. So I had classes 7 hours a day, 5 days a week, where I learned different aspects of being blind. And then by December of that year, about 8.5 months after I shot myself and after I'd returned home from blind rehab, I was back in the Rocky Mountains snowboarding.
Wow.
And I couldn't cook or do anything for myself, but getting that taste of independence back was a huge stepping off point for me. And so that was December. January, I was back in college. By July, I'd moved back out on my own. And by December of that next year, I had bought my first house. And
Wow, that's incredible.
so yeah. And so along that path is when I hit those classes that were inaccessible. And I was like, screw this. Like, I actually, something, even now, I struggle with when I come across accessibility barriers like that because I've worked so hard to get my independence back. When things like that, even like trying to get into this stupid Discord chat, when if for whatever reason it's a hot button for me, and it was that way with that college class. And I already wasn't in a great spot. It was over COVID, and I was pretty isolated. And it got me to the point. It kicked off about 2 years of alcoholism, and I actually ended up self-admitting to the VA mental health ward because I was worried I was going to hurt myself. And so
This was after
that's how,
the surgery.
yeah. So this was surgery was like the middle of 2019. This was by 2021 because by the end of 2020 I bought my first house, and The summer semester of 2021 is when all that went down with that statistics
Okay.
class. And so, I hadn't drank in a long time and I didn't think anything of it. I didn't realize yet that I was an alcoholic. I don't know how, but I didn't. I thought that because, I would go these long stints without drinking, that I was good. And so that actually ended up kicking off
Well,
6 years of really bad
what
alcoholism.
defined you as an
Go ahead.
alcoholic?
Surpasses that point
Yeah, like you said, you were
of
going long
become.
stints without drinking. So were you downing a bottle of vodka on Wednesdays or
Yeah, so the thing with alcoholism is like it doesn't go away. And so I had developed a it was really it was me not coping with everything that was going on, in the Marine Corps, especially in the infantry world. It's shut up and suck it
Yep.
up and get through it, and that serves a purpose there, and it's effective and it's necessary. But when I got out, I thought I could do the same thing with my mental health, and that wasn't the case. And so I was drinking and just trying to tough it out instead, and that caught up with me.
Okay.
But then I went this long period without drinking. And when I started again, initially there were like, actually, even no, initially it was immediately like, out of control. I drank to blackout, and within a couple of days, that's when I self admitted to the VA. And so, at its worst after that, like since between then and now, I am sober now, but when it was at its worst, I was drinking for 2 or 3 days straight and just being blackout drunk pretty much the whole time, and then recovering for 2 or 3 days and then doing it all over again.
Man,
And so,
that
yeah, it was bad.
it's an incredible journey that you've gone through, and it's fascinating just because what you went through originally, what led you to that, and then what you went through afterwards. It in itself could be worth a movie, and starring Sandra Bullock. It's just like your
Oh
recovery
yeah, I'll
process.
have
It's
a hot wife. Yeah. Um, well, and there's one more big thing. So I actually in 2022, well, I was still in the process of teaching myself how to code and all that good stuff. Still struggling with alcohol. I got diagnosed with a horrendous neurological degenerative neurological disease called Huntington's disease,
okay.
and it's a genetic disease that gets passed on from parent to child. And so basically the way that it initially you start to have behavioral issues, and then it turns into a movement disorder, and eventually you end up as a vegetable. Essentially, you're non-responsive, non-verbal, don't move, you're just in a nursing
And they were
home
able
until
to
your body shuts
identify
off.
this separately from your injury.
Yeah, so again, the injury was 2019, and I found this out in 2022
Yeah.
because we knew it was in my family because my mom's dad had died from it, and so had one of her sisters. But my mom had never shown symptoms and had never been tested, so we didn't think anything of it. And then she finally decided to get tested. Soon as she found out she had it, I called the next day to schedule an
That's got
appointment
to be nerve
to get
wracking.
tested, and it's just yeah, and so, there were months waiting up to the test and then months waiting for the results. And I was at rehab when I found out that I had it. And so when I came back from rehab, I, fell right back into drinking because then I was struggling with that. And it's been it's been a bit of a mess, but my first app, yeah, Xanagrams ended up coming out last year. And I think because I'm writing a book right now. I'm writing a memoir about all this, and it's interesting looking back at all this stuff, even stuff like that that's more recent than 5 years ago and what led up to my suicide attempt. But I I get an immense sense of purpose and fulfillment out of developing these apps that everyone can use, even though it's not like they're going viral or anything, but people are getting something out of them. And I get contacted by people pretty much every day, other blind people or just different disabilities that are using it. And now people that hear about all the stuff that I've been through. I'm 28 years old now, and I mean, that's a lifetime's worth of
Yeah.
stuff crammed into the past 6 years. And But I felt like I had done something meaningful now since I've been blind, and that's really when I got
Yeah.
sober. Was after that came out, and so it resonated that I was doing something that was helping people. And I actually, Xanagrams ended up winning 2 Game of the Year awards from accessibility focused sites at the end of
I
the
saw
year
those
last year.
awards.
And now, yeah, so it's been really neat. I'm working on new projects. I'm still adding content to Xanagrams. I just recently added live leaderboards to the game and stuff like that. And just plugging away while I write the book and keep developing because I'm full nerd now. And I'd never written a line of code. I'd literally never written a line of code in my life when I could see, but I've kind of fallen in love with it.
When you're, I mean, tell me about the experience of learning programming in your condition. Do you do you feel like you have any advantages? I know it sounds weird to ask that question, but do you think that you learn differently now than you did before?
Just my memory it has gotten, I feel like it's gotten pretty ridiculous. So just mostly the recall and keeping sense of how I've organized everything. And my computer and phone speak extremely fast. And so I think once I am reading stuff, it is an advantage because I can read it so fast. Finding the stuff is a different challenge, and especially finding accessible tools and
Mm-hmm.
resources is a challenge. But outside of that, so I initially started teaching myself this really obscure language called Quorum. It's being developed by the University of Las Vegas, Nevada, and their whole thing is making programming accessible. So it's all evidence
Okay.
based. The syntax is really simple. It's very light on symbols, and they were touting that they had an accessible game engine. And I spent 9 months learning that. Just reading their documentation on the language and trial and error in there. And I'll, the vast majority of blind people use Apple phones because of the they really have a superior screen reader on them, and the screen reader that comes on all Apple devices is free. It's just built
Hmm.
into every Apple device, so they're pretty common. And so that's why I had decided I wanted to build for. And so when the first time that I went to actually build a working prototype on an iPhone instead of on my computer, I really, because I was developing for Windows, I or on a Windows machine, I realized like, okay, everything is accessible except for this tool that I need to use to get this onto my device. And obviously with coding, I mean, building and running your code is a constant task. It's not something that I could just wait and have someone push a button for me like once a week. And so I only knew how to use the screen reader on my Windows computer. So when I ended up having to switch away from that language, I switched over to Swift and using a Mac with Xcode. And I didn't know how to use the voiceover screen reader on a Mac, so I used my Windows computer to read about how to use the Mac screen reader. Then I practiced using that on my Mac while I was reading with my Windows computer. Then when I got a hang of using the Mac, then I started reading about Swift, and then I started teaching myself Xcode and Swift. And yeah, it it was a mess. But and even now, I mean, there's certain things that are inaccessible with Xcode, and a lot of things that are inaccessible with the online portions of the Apple developer ecosystem. But I can, just like I did in here, I trying to get into this Discord meeting. I tried on my iPhone, I tried on my PC, and I tried on my Mac, and it's the same thing. Like pushing an update for Xanagrams or any of my other apps that I'm working on. Some portions of it I can do on my Mac, some portions of it I can only knock out on my Windows computer, and some portions I can only do it on my phone. But I can get through it. And so that's the big kind of catch with doing it blind. And obviously, doing the visual interfaces are difficult. I I can interpret what I think the code is doing visually. I mean, I code every part of my apps. It's just a one man development team. But when I have people testing it, like if my parents or my girlfriend end up over at my house, the only thing I can do is show them my apps running on a device and basically tell them like, hey, tell me what looks like crap here. And then I'm trying to figure out through them, who aren't familiar with coding whatsoever, what in my code might be causing what they're seeing. And so they're usually not explaining what I actually need them to explain when they find issues, and it just turns into this gaggle. But those are like the big sticky points of doing it blind. Otherwise, I don't think it's probably not that much different.
I love the optimism. I I'm over here reflecting on myself like, God, I'm lazy because I have the ability in some cases, not only the blindness but other disabilities that are out there that make it challenging for people who do more than I do. And I just like I have a full-time job and I try to balance some side projects and raise a family and all that, but at the end of the day it never feels enough. So you're very inspiring with your story to be able to turn around such a an outcome in your life and to ride it productively like that. I've watched like 4 seasons of Shark Tank, and your story trumps every single thing I've heard on that crap show. Like, it's just, it's incredible. And
Like it,
I know that it came from something really negative, but I think that you're showing that you can turn things around and you're creating this product. You're learning to develop, and you made Zanagrams. It sounds like that you have some other ideas in your head for future projects, which I think is
yeah,
inevitable.
and several that are in the works. Yeah, they're already in development. Yeah.
Do you have any team members that work with you on these?
Um, no, it's literally just me. And so that's in an ideal world, I'll be able to grow my company to the point where I can actually hire a sighted developer to do all the visual
Okay.
stuff. Because even though my apps do present visually, and I am getting better. Like my next app I've is a studying app, and I've done a lot of work with animation, and it's again another thing where like I try and write all the code for an animation, and then once someone's over at my house, I'm like, hey, does this is this doing this? Is this doing X? And when they say no, then trying to track it down is terrible because I can't just incrementally do it. I have to code the entire thing. But it's still the visuals of my apps, even though they do present, they're probably plain. And I really, to grow the company, I need them to be more visually
Mm-hmm.
appealing. And so that's the accessibility side of things will never go away. That is that's a cornerstone of me. That's a value that I hold that I won't compromise on. But I just, that would be key to the success on the software side.
If technology came out that they said they could solve your eyesight, would you do it?
I've thought about that, and I don't know. I think it would depend on how good it is.
Right.
So, like, have you heard of
Oh,
Neuralink?
absolutely.
Okay, yeah. So, Elon says that they're going to be able to restore sight with that, but I had looked at getting an cochlear implant, and we ended up not doing it because there's too much other hardware in my head, and they said it was too big of a risk. But what they described to me when I was going through that process was that, hey, if you go through with this, you're not getting your hearing back. It's like a total different means of input, and you have to learn to interpret
Huh.
that. And so if it's I mean, anything would be helpful over being completely lights out like I am, like even just being able to make out
Yeah.
shapes. But I've thought, I think I would still use screen reading software and stuff outside of times when I had to, like with accessibility issues, obviously being able to see the screen to get around them would be awesome. But like the speed at which I can read things is insane because of how fast my computer talks. And there's small stuff like that where I don't think I would change. But yeah, definitely being able to drive again would be massive. But it's with what I have right now. I ski, I rock climb, I whitewater kayak, I skydive. I just competed in a Brazilian jiu-jitsu
Oh my
tournament
god.
last weekend against people without disabilities. Like I'm making the most of it, and that's why I try and be open about all this stuff. Is it's been 5 years of work to get there, and it's been conscious work, and it's been uncomfortable, but you can make the most of your situation and whatever you're going through. Everybody has
Yeah.
their crap that they're going through at some point, and whatever it is, if it's the worst thing that you've been through, it's the worst thing that you've been through, even if it doesn't hold a candle to what someone else has been through. But you can get through it. You just have to choose
Yeah.
to.
It's all relative. And I tell you, your story
Yep.
reminds me so much, as cheesy as this sounds, like Iron Man. He just gets completely shafted with his situation and makes the best of it, which of course makes the worst for other people, but that's not the point.
I was expecting that to turn into a Helen Keller joke.
Well, and I'm thinking about as you develop Xanagrams and you do look for another team member that has sight and that can help expand your program to the next level. I can really see you taking, like, it's a battle between wanting to dive more into the development side, and then you also have to pick up the business side of skills, because you're going to have to learn to manage teams. You're going to have to learn to manage developers. It's one thing to be a developer, but it's something completely different to manage developers. And you got to learn like Scrum processes and to be able to organize the workflows. Like when one person's working on the program, they'll work out of one file that they push to their production environment, and then you bring on a second person, and then you quickly realize, wait, we needed some kind of development file that's separate than the production server, because the crap that you're pushing is ruining everything. And it's just like this long journey of understanding people, understanding the way they code. And it's like you can learn Python, you can learn C++, you can learn Sharp, but there's still this odd ability for everyone to learn it the way that they learn it. And it's almost like translating languages. It's, why did you comment this here? Why did you write the code this way? You could have done it in 4 lines less if you wrote it this way. And so I think those...
Use that architecture.
Yeah. And I think that the direction that you're going with the applications, there's a huge open doorway of opportunity. And as you bring people on, they're going to serve their own function and role. And so I'm really excited to see where your future goes. Like it's just inspiring and very interesting. But I was just going to say, do you think you'll ever get into video games, or are you going to stay with the direction that you're going now, these learning apps and these educational apps?
I definitely want to get into video games. I don't know, because I don't have a degree and it's all self-taught. I don't necessarily see that happening unless it's with my own company. And again, if I had a sighted developer that could handle that stuff, because I can do basic animations like making things slide on and off the
That's
screen
awesome.
smoothly and looking good. Or not pixels, sprites and stuff like that, I need someone sighted to do it. And so if I had that person, I would start delving more and more into probably mobile first, but top-down games or side-scrolling games and stuff like that, because I have all these ideas for how to make things that are typically inaccessible more accessible, and it is doable. And since I'm not being paid by someone else, I can invest the extra time to do it, and it's not skin off anyone else's back.
Yeah, a couple things that come to mind would be like a text-based adventurer, where you go and you just choose.
I'm doing that right
awesome.
now.
I think those are a great way to explore. Like it's overlooked really easily. Like take Skyrim, for example. I mean, that's old enough that you may have been able to experience it before your incident. And it's an example of you talk to somebody and you pick an option, and perhaps the game unfolds differently because of the option that was selected. I've played games. I'm an Android guy, and not necessarily out of intentional decision. I've just always been that. I found an Android app game that it was this just text-based adventure. It was either like a drug lord empire or a medieval quest of saving your feudal kingdom. And you'd pick kind of what happened.
Yeah.
You'd read and respond, and the depth of that, I think, sometimes can go a lot deeper than a visual aspect that's provided. And that's probably a lot of the reason why Skyrim, Cyberpunk, is probably Grand Theft Auto. Like they can't have too much of a complex of a decision tree because of the visuals and the graphics. That actually holds them back. And so you may be in a better position to create a text-based game that has really, really deep consequences for your choices and actions that you could not tap into in a visual game.
Exactly been my thought process, and what I'm trying to do with one of my projects is have that level of detail textually, and then just static art to make it pop a little bit more visually. But I can market that as a new take on a retro
Yeah.
style, and then it's fully accessible. If it's not fully animated, that's okay. And so that's what I'm going to try and do. I put it on the back burner right now because I had some people reach out asking, like specifically for this study app that I'm coming out. It's school's hard, blind, and so I was like, okay, this will take me 2 months. I can invest time into this because that other project will take me a couple of years, but I will be coming back to it for
I'd be
sure.
very excited to see that develop. And another idea I have, just to throw it at you, and you can take it as you want. If you grow a team, a development team, and you're able to bring on visual aspects, I think it would be really, this is weird to say it like this, but exciting to play a game that is from the perspective of a blind person. It's like you're playing a game and it's pitch black, and then somehow the game interacts with the fact that you can't see. So it's a visual game for people who can see, but the character that you're playing is blind, and there's different kinds of ways to navigate through the game itself. It's more than just giving back to the community and saying, hey, this is an accessibility game. It's expanding the understanding to those who aren't blind. Like I'm freaking 36 years old. God, I hate saying that. And I've never sat down and talked to a blind person. As a child, I've talked to deaf people. That's weird to say that as well. I've communicated with deaf people.
You've talked
Yeah.
at deaf
And
people.
as I think I was 8 years old the first time I come across somebody, and I was trying to understand how they received. They read my lips so well that I didn't really connect that they couldn't hear my words. And I'd get excited and carried away
Yeah.
and play these games with them. So I'm just very fascinated as a person, and I think a game that takes the perspective of a blind person, which is weird to say, a visual game that does that, but I think would help people like me appreciate the challenges that you have on a daily basis. I mean, things that we take for granted: going to a shower, going to the bathroom, watching TV, cooking. You know how much Gordon Ramsay stuff I sit and watch and like, I want to do that. And I think there's so many opportunities for even cooking and blind. Like what do you do for cooking?
I I actually don't have any sense of smell either. It's all by feel with the spatula. So I typically I cook the same kind of stuff. It's a lot of ground meats when I am cooking meat and then or fish because I can feel like the texture
Okay.
changes. I don't mess around with raw chicken and I don't mess around with raw pork. Everything else, if I want pork or chicken, I'll buy a rotisserie chicken
Yeah.
or like something that's pre-cooked pork, but I don't mess with that stuff. Or eggs. Eggs are super easy. I mean, the texture changes the entire time you're cooking them. It's all just that, and been trial and error. For those first like 9 months that I lived with my parents, I made myself cook every day, and I had my mom watch.
Wow.
And it was the same thing. That's how I learned computer skills early on. Was you learn the very basics at blind rehab, but none of your well, I think I had one instructor that was blind. The rest of my instructors were all sighted people, so they don't know how to use this stuff to the level that I do. At the time, they taught me what they knew, and then I really had to learn on my own. And so I started a blog when I first got home from blind rehab, so that I had to learn how to use
Yeah.
the internet with a screen reader. I had to use it every day, and so I got good with it. And thank God it's not on the internet anymore. But I did. It helped me a lot, and I mean, again, I could have sat around and not done anything with my life, but I refuse to, and that's kind of what I'm trying to. Whatever it is you've got going on, focus on what you can
Hmm.
do and not what you can't, and figure out. I mean, that's like with the jujitsu thing. I wrestled in high school, but I'd never done Brazilian jiu-jitsu, but I really wanted to get into it, and I called around until I found a gym that was willing to work with me, and I've been hooked ever since I found
That's
one.
great.
So, yeah, it's
Uh,
kind of life lessons that apply everywhere.
yeah, I've been recently trying to learn. Took some classes for a Krav Maga, the Israeli martial arts.
Hmm.
It's supposed to be a little bit of everything, street fighting,
Yeah.
MMA inspired.
Yep.
I'm not a huge fan of MMA just because they're so meta about it now. Like everyone just tries to grapple you and throw you to the ground, and it's more wrestling than it is fighting. I like boxing because the reaction response in boxing is like 1,000 times more advanced than MMA. And MMA is like trying to fight a giant spider. It's really weird. It's like you're trying to hand combat a spider and it just fucking grapples you and takes you to the ground and sucks your blood. And in boxing, I feel like there's so much more skill required, at least at the level of competitive sports. But I digress. In some sense, I feel that this is really weird to say it, but this is a true feeling that I have right now. You have a type of social superpower that other people who have sight don't have. Because you know what people with sight waste their time doing all day? Facebook, short videos on YouTube, shorts on TikTok, shorts on Facebook, shorts on Instagram. All I do is I walk around and I see people just on their phone, not reading anything good. They're just watching shorts, cats meowing at each other, and people talking about the workplace. I get it. I watch shorts. I hate it. I hate that I watch shorts. It consumes my life. And I'm sitting here thinking, damn, if that's one advantage that you have, you are omitted from the curse of social media shorts. Like, at least I would think so. Because it's like,
It saves a lot of time.
yeah, it's like I don't need to see that new meme. I don't need to spend 3 hours in the morning before I go to work watching this stuff. Not only describing that from my own perspective, but like I said, everyone around me, it's just all they do is just watch their phone. And I can't help but now to think, what's the difference between, it's like they're selectively blind. Yeah, they choose when not to see things versus when to see things. And it's honestly a waste of human potential. So I think that the direction you're going just obliterates what anybody else can try to accomplish. Because unfortunately, video shorts and social media eat up your time almost as bad as alcohol does. And it just doesn't erode your liver and brain. Well, okay, your brain maybe.
You don't have to be lazy. Yeah, you don't have to be lazy. Like you can get off your ass. That's to some degree that's people. I
Oh,
mean, there's
absolutely.
there's not a lot of other blind people doing this stuff, and it's still, yeah, I don't know. It's just, yeah, I don't know.
So what's
I could go down a rabbit hole, but
I'm already
yeah.
well into this rabbit hole. I'm so fascinated by your story. What? So tell me a little bit about your next project. I know you had said that you dabbled in like the text based game and some other ideas, but what's the one concrete thing you're doing here in the next 6 months?
The thing that's on in the forefront is the book. I'm trying to get the book out, or not trying. I'm going to get the book out for September
Wow.
for Suicide Awareness Month. But
Jeez. Yeah, that's
um,
incredible.
just perfect, perfect time for it to come out. But app wise, right now I'm I'm about ready to release this for beta. It's just a flashcard studying app that's totally accessible, just like Zanagrams is for that different slew of disabilities. And even I think one thing I didn't mention was Xanagrams. So there's these things called refreshable braille
Huh.
displays, and they're essentially digital displays that have pins that pop up from at first it's all level, and then these pins can pop out of this plastic board to spell Braille. And it just, as people are reading, they can advance down a line of a document and stuff like that. And Zanagrams works with those as well for Braille readers or people if you want to learn Braille. And so that's another thing that this studying app will do. But so that'll go into beta here pretty soon. I could honestly have it in beta here probably in 2 weeks if I wasn't trying to write the book. But I do have the kind of text-based fantasy RPG that I'm working on is almost like an old school dungeon crawler, except it's not always in dungeons. We're traveling over land, and eventually things come along, and it's all handwritten procedural generation. There's no AI. It's all stuff that I'm writing that takes different things into context, and it'll takes. It can conjugate verbs on its own, and it's, again, not using AI. I think it's interesting, so I've taken the time to develop these things, and that's what I'm working on. I'm still in the early stages, and the only system that I have really even remotely built out, even to showing a concept, is the terrain generation really the descriptions of the terrain. But yeah, that'll be a long-term project. It's fun, but it's a mess of files. So we'll see when it gets there.
I feel like we need a whole nother podcast on understanding how you operate your local computer. Like, how do you organize files, and how do you actually do the 1 to 2 to 3? But we won't get into that now. I definitely want to do a follow-up interview with you.
Yeah.
You said your book's coming out in September. What do you have a name for it?
Yeah, it's called, tentatively, it's called Raw Dog. I have a sick sense of humor, and so I think that's hilarious. Plus, Marines are called devil dogs, and so I'm being real raw about my story. I thought it was funny, so that's what I'm doing for now.
So Raw Dog is the name of your book. I'm going to side comment this so I can look at it later, because I would love to read this. And maybe even look at getting it on something like Audible. Have you ever looked at Audible?
Yeah, so I just hit the 30 or crossed the 30,000 word threshold today.
Okay.
I think it's probably about halfway done. I'm investigating different editors and publishing options right now. So but yeah, my goal is hard that I would rather read my own audiobook, but it's just, I don't use Braille enough to read that at not a grandma pace.
Sure.
It would be like listening to a third grader try and read a book. So I don't know that I'll do an audiobook. We'll see. But it'll definitely be print and digitally available.
Well, you can always commission a family member to help you out with that if they're interested. I guess the reason why I brought Audible is because, again, going back to my unfortunate lazy state, I didn't do good at reading books throughout my life, and I regret that, because to me, books is the ultimate knowledge. I don't want to spend my entire life diving into history, but at the same time, going forward in life requires knowing other people's stories, whether it's from 10 years ago or 1,000 years ago.
Yeah. I
love understanding people's stories. And I think that with your situation, being an Audible, it's a book that I can see people like me picking up and listening, because I'll do it on the way to and from work. I got about a 30-minute drive. And so it gives me a perfect chance to listen to it, because as soon as I get home, I got to make my kid dinner. I got to hang out with my wife. I got to get tomorrow ready. Yeah. And I mean, my kid's homework alone takes an hour of my day. She's a complete reflection of me as a kid, as a failure in math. And it's just, I had to call my mom and apologize to her the other day, because she was acting just like I did. It's just, what's 2? It's not as simple as this example, but it's, what's 2 plus 2? And then she's like, oh, look, a butterfly. I'm like, no, come back over here. But so let me know if that name changes, because I'm going to look this book up towards the end of this year. And I'm really interested in it, and I would love to bring this up on the show as well. And so people can take a look at it, learn about, if you have an iPhone or an iPad, take a look at Zanagrams. If you could explain Xanagrams in 10 words or less, how would you describe it?
Trivia.
Perfect.
That's what I
yeah.
got.
You beat me.
There's a lot to it.
Except 10 words or less, just one word.
I'm also obviously I'm starting to do more interviews like this, but I'm also a public speaker, and so you can find if any of what we just learned together uh, interests you at all, and you think you know of an organization or somebody who would like to hear me speak,
Okay.
you can find me at zachtidwell.net.
Yeah, I definitely want to go back and get all your links for this, not only Xanagram, but anything you have.
Okay.
Because when I make the YouTube video, I'll post all that in the description. And it just gives more exposure to
Awesome.
the depth of all your projects. Now, my channel isn't.
Yeah, that sounds
It's
great.
it's brand new. I think I this is like the umpteenth channel I've made in YouTube in the past 10 years, 20 years, whatever. Actually, almost 20 years. 19 years. Oh, my God. I've been trying to make a YouTube video since 2005. So, but this channel is doing really well. You are going to be the 6th or 7th upload. And it's people generally really love the idea of talking to indie developers. So this was really exciting for me, and I'm glad to take up some of your time in the day and just talk about your life, talk about your game. I know this isn't a Joe Rogan podcast, but it just was natural out of curiosity of your situation. So, Zach, I really thank you for coming on the show today.
Yeah, dude, that was awesome, and I'm proud of what I've done. So it's cool to get to share it. So thank you.
Yeah, and the game you have out, the trivia application you have out now, Zanagrams, on the iOS App Store, available for iPhone or iPads. It's a word puzzle trivia game, and it sounds like you keep it updated, and you may even want to future partner with happy hours. So like I live in Colorado, and there are so many breweries out here. It's insane. So and they always do trivia week, like Tuesdays or Wednesdays, always some random company coming out for trivia. And they just throw up a laptop and, okay, everybody, the rules are don't pull out your cell phone, and we're going to get started. So if you could evolve your game and incorporate with the brewery's trivia nights, I think that would help take a whole new angle on it. Like if you were updating it for trivia and things like that, pop trivia, history trivia, the list goes on and on. And so just one last idea to throw out there.
It'd be really cool.
Yeah, ultimately, this has been a great pleasure. I want to stay in contact with you, so feel free to stay in this Discord. If you ever want to message me on the side, I love offering my volunteer services for if you ever get into game development and need voiceovers or something like that, you can reach out to me. So just kind of I don't want this to be, hey, we talked, never hear from you again kind of thing. So definitely keep me updated, and I hope that things continue to unfold productively for you. And then even outside of games, if you just need someone to talk to, reach out to me. Let me know. I've been on this planet for fucking 36 years, and I've spent more time trying to understand why I'm here than anything. So you've helped expand that understanding.
Yeah.
And Zach,
I'll send you an email after we hop off here with the links, and
that'd be great. Take your time with that. And
okay.
If do you play any games? Are you able to play any games like just casually? Is there anything on Steam or
You mean
consoles or anything like that? Do you play FIFA or NBA 2K?
console actually has some accessible games, and some of them are accessible on PC. The problem is Steam's accessibility support is garbage.
Oh, no.
But actually, Forza, the latest Forza that came out is completely accessible for totally blind people. The Last of Us Part 2 is completely accessible.
Did you play those?
I've played The Last of Us. I haven't played Forza. I got into The Last of Us 2 like right after I lost my sight, and then that was before I actually really knew how to do anything for myself, so I really kind of just needed some entertainment. And because I'm deaf in one ear, trying to play a game like that completely based off audio is tough. But I played that. I played some Call of Duty Zombies, which is not accessible. Some other blind people just walked me through the menus and we played together, which was kind of crazy. And then Gears of War 4, I think it was, had a game mode that was partially accessible. And honest, there's some pretty committed blind people to games out to playing
Yeah.
games out there that I had. I haven't touched my consoles in a couple of years at this point.
Well, hopefully one day you can release a game for them. And I think that your dedication and
That
devotion
would be sweet.
will make that happen. Very inspiring, like I said. I think I'm gonna then maybe this weekend I'm just gonna blindfold myself and try to figure out life on Saturday, Sunday like that. And I know it sounds kind of joking,
Good
but
luck.
I do want to understand more. God, I appreciate you. And like I said, if you need anything from me, just reach out and I'd love to help you out. So I really thank you for taking the time to jump on.
Yeah, thanks, man. I'll be in touch. And yeah, throw your blindfold on and just cruise around your house for a while. I don't use a cane in areas like that I know.
Wow.
So just Helen Keller your way around and get the experience.
I'll let you know too how that goes. I'm all into this kind of
All
weird
right.
experimentation, so
Cool.
it's going to be interesting.
All right. Cool, man. Thanks for having me on.
All the best in the years to come, and please make them many, many, many years.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, man.